Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our presentation here this evening in discussion with Secretary of State Paul Pate. So we're doing something a little bit unique. We changed in the 11th hour this morning because we were going to do an Iowa Federation of Young Republicans discussion with Secretary Pate about the primary election. Then we were also going to do a Story County Republican Party discussion with Secretary of State about the primary election. And so we decided we would just broadcast this discussion on both feeds today. And then Jacob Minnock is here from the Young Republicans with me, and then John Henry from the Republican Party of Story County. So we're going to kind of co-host this discussion this evening, kill two birds with one stone, and hopefully get some good information out there to the public. So my name is Brett Barker, and I am privileged to serve as the chairman of the Republican Party of Story County, and then also serve as the national committee man for the Iowa Federation of Young Republicans. So
and no birds will be killed.
Yep, no literal birds are being killed today.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Love it, love it. Well, I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to catch you up a little bit, maybe, and answer some questions that are out there. This COVID-19 has been more than a challenge, not only for Iowans, but across the world. And your government, I can say, under the leadership of Governor Reynolds, I think has done a fantastic job. There are all kinds of new twists. There is no playbook here that was prepped for this specific type of a challenge. So we've had to kind of adjust and learn as we're going through it. But fortunately, some of the groundwork we had laid early on in planning for I shouldn't say typical, but for a crisis is paying off today. And in my game as an elections official, we are risk managers. We do it, unfortunately, on a regular basis. Never at this scale, though. We've dealt with things from tornadoes to various other issues that may have impacted an election day, winter storms, you name it. But this one was a lot bigger and a little more challenging in that sense. But I think we have worked with all the 99 county auditors and the governor's office to try and make sure that the primary coming up here will be a successful one, and that everybody will be able to vote, and they'll be able to vote safely, and our poll workers will be protected. So that's been my driving mission right now, and we're going to continue to build on that. When we started this process, and hopefully most of you can relate to this because of your strong interest in good government, but elections really don't happen overnight, not to the scale we're running them these days. We have to make a lot of decisions sometime before the election, significantly before the elections, to make sure the mechanics will all work. And it sounds a little oversimplistic, but it's little things like how many envelopes and ballots do you have to have printed and prepped? When under a normal process would be nothing because we could handle it on a relative ease. But when you start looking at the COVID impact on the whole country, everybody is fighting for the same resources. So think about it for a moment, how many facilities in the country could print the ballots that we would like to have, to be able to deal with it in a more non-traditional manner, or mailing out pieces of mail. It was pretty significant to try and balance it out. And I bring that up because there are those out there who are strong advocates for voting by mail. Strictly, they think every state should run their elections where they mail them a ballot, unsolicited. If you're a registered voter, you get a ballot. I have not been a fan of that, and I have not changed my position on that. I'm very uncomfortable with that concept because to me, that's like mailing a blank check. I have no idea who's on the other end getting that thing, and that makes me really uncomfortable. So I'm not a fan, but more importantly, Iowans have expressed very clearly to at least I think myself, and I think you would agree, that they want choices. That's why we see our state is one of the highest states in the country when it comes to voter participation. We see people like the choice of voting in person at a polling place. And yes, there are those who want to use early voting, and there are those who want to use absentee, and there are those who like going down to the courthouse, perhaps, from an early voting standpoint. Those are the options they choose. And I think that's been working very well for us. And I think the numbers show that. We have, as I said, one of the highest voting participation rates in the country. Having that in mind, how do we deal with COVID-19 going into this election? In March, this whole country was thrown into a very serious situation where not knowing exactly what this thing is going to do to us. And frankly, we had more questions than we had answers. We had government leaders trying to save our lives and at the same time give us some level of normalcy and able to keep our country functioning. And elections, I believe, are a key component to that. So when we were looking at how do we get the elections out there and done in such a fashion that gives everybody the opportunity to vote and have their voice heard, and to do it in such a fashion that they're safe and the people who are administering those elections are safe. That was our big issue. So we went in and looked at our system here in Iowa, and I felt real comfortable that our absentee ballot process could fill that gap during this special time of need. And working with our county election officials and reaching out to the governor's office, we went with the route of encouraging Iowans to vote via absentee. It's not a new thing to Iowans. About 40% of Iowans in a normal general election will vote absentee. So we put the plan together to make sure we could reach out to Iowans and give them that option to vote safely from their homes. We mailed out those absentee ballot requests, which I hope all of you received. That was funded through a federal grant. So it wasn't state dollars, but it was a federal grant. And I think well spent, frankly. And we sent that out to the individuals. And by law, I have to send it out to all active registered voters. It seems a little strange because some of you are going like, well, if there's no party, why am I mailing out an absentee ballot? You know, because this is a primary. This is the Democrat and Republicans choosing who they're going to vote for. So why do we have to send it to all of them? Well, because everybody has the option to declare their party right up to the point they vote. We don't know how they're going to want to vote in the primary. So we have to extend that invitation to all. Having said that, the trends I'm seeing right now on those returning absentee ballots is pretty consistent with what you see in a caucus even. There are a few people maybe who are non-party that chose a party, but I don't think it's out of proportion to a normal election cycle. Pardon me. And so we're seeing that. What we are seeing though is a huge turnout in the sense of requesting absentee ballots. I suspect part of that is because we're all sitting at home. I don't want to oversimplify it, but we're at home. So, and we're thinking about what's going on in our government because we're waiting for some direction on when they're going to open back up our economy and let us get back to our lives. And we want to have a voice in what elected officials are going to be serving us more because of this heightened interest in our government. So we're seeing huge numbers. I was just looking today, just to give you a perspective, in 2016, which was our last presidential year in our primary, we had about 38,000 people who requested an absentee ballot. This cycle, we're presently at 370,000 plus. I'll say it again, 370,000 who have requested it. In Story County alone, we've had over 9,000, which is significantly up from what you would normally see. The numbers have not necessarily exceeded what we have seen in some of the general election cycle because primaries tend to be a little lighter, quite a bit lighter actually. Right now, we're looking at in 2016, there were 206,000 people who actually voted in Iowa in the primary. So numbers, 206,000 actually voted. Right now, we have 370,000 people who have requested a ballot. Normally, we see a pretty significant fall off. I'm not sure we're going to see as big a fall off because I think people are genuinely tuned in more right now. So they're looking at this much closer and they will be voting. That's about over 160,000 more people indicating an interest in voting. At least they've requested a ballot and we'll watch as they turn them back in. That's a big difference in how we're going forward with this. Also, this is a pretty interesting primary cycle of people who are paying attention. I mean, we've got congressional primaries across the state for Republicans. We have a U.S. Senate primary for the Democrats. We have local primaries for several legislative and some county seats. So I think that raises the level of interest as well. So putting all that together, we felt the safest way we could do this back in March and early April was to go with promoting the absentee approach because we weren't sure exactly where this virus was going to be at. And in fairness, we weren't sure we would have enough poll workers to be able to facilitate working all the sites. And we also were experiencing the challenge that we didn't know if we'd have enough voting sites, because there were a lot of these locations that we were running into across the state who did not want that kind of number of the public coming into their facilities because of the virus. And that put some serious restrictions on what we had to do. So working with county auditors to try to figure out what and how we could best deal with that has been a real challenge. And we also wanted to make sure that our poll workers were not going to be exposed or at risk. So trying to make sure we had all the safety equipment for them. My office has been extremely involved in getting federal assistance, and we've also, through federal grants, been able to assist the counties, making sure they get hand sanitizers, that they're getting social distancing markers that they can put out at the polling locations, the gloves, face masks if possible. We've also supplied them some financial resources to help pay for sanitizing before and after the site is used as a polling location. A lot of those things that we hope will make this a little smoother for them as well. Because we want the poll workers to be safe, and we want the voters to be safe, because they're going to have to be cleaning the stations every time a voter votes. For those of you who went to Hy-Vee, you'll see the Hy-Vee workers are wiping down the conveyor belts, and they're wiping keypads down in many places. So these are all things we have to kind of prepare for in an election as well. So those are all components of the process as we're going out there. The other side of it is some of our seniors had concerns about, should they be a poll worker this cycle? They're very committed. They've been there, dedicated, and very important to our success. But should they be out there when they're one of the highest risk populations? So we put an aggressive campaign out there to recruit poll workers, maybe of a younger age, to assist us in this time of need. And I'm really proud of the fact that we had nearly 1,000 people already through our efforts who identified themselves as saying, hey, I'm interested in helping out. Give me more information, line me up with my county, and maybe I can help out at the polls this coming cycle. So those are all the components as they unfold, and we're continuing to work those out. The National Guard, we arranged to have them working with the governor to deliver these supplies that we've identified. So those are being delivered over the next week or so. So those will be ready for the elections as well. And as I said, it's been a lot of people involved in providing some best practice ideas and making sure we're doing our best job we can. So that's kind of the overview on the election part. Open it up to questions or other things and go from there.
Yeah, you talked a lot about poll workers, and that is something that both the Young Republicans and the Republican Party of Story County have sent out messaging about that, looking for volunteers. So
Great.
if anyone's listening, I would encourage you, reach out to us. You can message our pages you're watching this video on. We'll make sure you get that information if you didn't see it, because we know that it's important, especially like you said, that young people that are less at risk step up to ensure that people can vote. So that's really important. And then for me, it's also encouraging to hear the turnout that we're seeing. Because one of the messages that I like to beat the drum on is I hear people all the time come November saying, I don't like these choices. And when I ask, well, did you vote in the primary? The answer the majority of the time is, well, no. And so I think it's important that if people want a say in who their general election choices are, that they get out there and they vote in these primaries. So I hope that people vote in this primary, learn how important and how easy it is, and they continue to do that going forward. So if I had a silver lining I want to see from COVID, I want to see increased primary participation rates.
I couldn't agree more, Brett. I just want to underscore, I too have heard this when it comes to the fall election, there'll be some grumbling saying, well, I don't like the Republican or the Democrat either. And I'm going, where were you in the primary? You look at presidential elections and you see the huge numbers of candidates running during the caucus phase. And we have some of the same things when we're running into congressional races in certain districts and et cetera. So you're right. This is your chance to get your voice heard on the ground floor.
Okay, I'm going to ask one of these questions.
Okay.
You mentioned that you have absentee voting, you have early voting, and you have poll side voting as options. What if somebody picks all three? Is that why we need voter ID?
Well, most of you know my position on voter ID. I've been battling for it for some time, and I was pleased that we finally got that legislation passed. And it's been instrumental and crucial on these absentee ballots, so that when you request your ballot, we're asking for your unique ID number or driver's license number. Those precautions are crucial. And we have a central data system. So you can try those options you just said, but we would capture you very quickly and tell you, no, you only get one vote. This is Iowa, not like some states might have a bad rap for being that way. We're pretty tough on that one.
We aren't going to name names, Chicago.
Illinois.
I think I'll stay out of that one right now. But
Vote early, vote often.
We can say it. He can't.
He can't
oh, Jacob doesn't have to get beat up by him so early here.
Okay, I was a resident there for a little while too. So.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just one of those things that Iowans do take this seriously, and I made it clear before. I think it's so important that we assure people that we want them to be able to vote easy, but we also want to make sure that we are ensure that it's a legitimate vote. We're not going to have anybody taking advantage of our situation here with COVID-19 or any other. But the safeguards are all there; they're all intact. We were very pleased that our counties pretty much all embraced the various e-poll books, the laptops at the polling locations. Now that's a huge improvement for every county. It's got those. That's almost a catch you right then if somebody tries to vote who maybe already voted absentee.
And as far as the process goes, so folks can visualize, every registered voter got one of these. And so this is my wife, because I sent mine in. So when I'm done, I'm going to march this upstairs to her and remind her she needs to mail it in. But it worked out nice because I have that as a prop. And then a few days after I sent mine in, I got this from our county auditor in the mail, which is my ballot that I'm going to open up and fill out here. So nice and easy to cast your vote from the comfort of your own home right now.
It is. And the huge turnout, the response we've had, believe me, the county auditors aren't complaining in the sense that they don't want to do it. They just have to deal with the fact it's been a huge response. So they're having to put a lot more bodies online to get these ballots back out. And so, give them a little wiggle room, but if you don't see your ballot, you should check in with your auditor, but you can track that as well. Once you sent that absentee ballot request form in, you can go to voterready.iowa.gov and it will show you where your process is at, and you can track it right to the point where your ballot gets returned back to your auditor, so it's been processed.
And there's a comment in the chat that highlights one of your points, and that's a former California resident who's now at Iowa State University, who still gets absentee ballots automatically sent to her parents' home in California. So
yeah,
it goes to show your point earlier about the automatic ballot sending.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So John or Jacob, ask away.
I've actually got a question, and I think it's fitting that I am not only an Iowa Young Republican, but most of the time when there's not a global pandemic going on, you can find me in Story County. And Story County is home to Iowa State University, the largest and arguably best university in the state. There are a lot of young individuals there. So my question, Mr. Secretary, just why is it important for not just young Republicans, but young voters to be active in the primary process?
Well, as I said earlier, the primary is significant in the sense that it's your chance to kind of set the pace for what kind of candidate you want to support and get elected. You're not down to the two big parties, one selection only in the fall election. There's a full variety out there right now, so that you have a chance to kind of impact a lot more the path. As I said, if you're a Republican, we've got congressional primaries out there. Take a hard look at those and see which one best represents what you would like to see in your next congressional representative. Those are all very important. And I can tell you that the result of the young person's vote is significant. I would submit to you from a historical standpoint, we saw our highest youth voter turnout was, in my lifetime at least, of voting, was under two presidential campaigns, one Republican, one Democrat. Most of us will say right away, because of the point we are in 2020, President Obama's first election, he carried the youth vote very strongly, high turnout from the young people on that side. But we also have Ronald Reagan in his first election. The young person vote really came out and made a difference. And here in Iowa, just reflect back just to 2018. What the Democrat Party was able to do with their youth vote in the urban centers like Polk County and Lynn County and those areas like that made a difference to where they got to capture 2 congressional seats from us, right off from under the Republicans. It was that youth vote coming out there, and in fairness, that youth powerhouse, if you will, of volunteers who went out into the suburbs in those areas and convinced some of those suburb no party people to come over. So if there's a secret weapon going into 2020, it is our youth, in the sense that we need to get them fired up. We need to let them know why their voice counts. It's more than just helping stuff some envelopes and attend a pizza party. It's really about how they get to choose and how they get to fire other people up beyond their own peer group. And we've got to make sure our messaging is tuned into both the youth and the suburbs. That's where we're at right now. And I think we can't underestimate that enough.
And you hit on a big point there, and that's why the YRs exist. We came into existence because we knew millennials are the largest voting bloc right now. And we knew that that's exactly the impact of 2018 was in that voting demographic. So that's why we exist, and we're looking for folks to help us in those key races. So right now we're working on finding where those key suburban races are that are not only going to help the local House districts in the state, but also then potentially flip the US House districts too. So yeah, we definitely know we need to be on the ground, as whatever that means in this environment, but whether that's this way or other ways, but we need to be reaching voters as much as we can in those key races going into the fall. So that definitely hits on that point I wanted to make.
Well, certainly. And I think because of this unique situation with the COVID-19, the younger voters are frankly pretty savvy on this whole digital world we live in. So they have an edge already. And we want to make sure as Republicans, we've got that same active edge for our cause. And I'm not downplaying all Iowa voters in the sense of digital world. I'm seeing a lot of older people now who have embraced Zoom and Skype and everything else because they want to talk to their families. And campaigns have had to become more creative and become digital in their approach in a much more aggressive way. So yeah, there'll be some differences in the 2020 election cycle and how we deliver our messaging. But young Republicans can help us with the message. I think what we stand for, they will embrace. I think it is the most popular position anyone would want to be in or support. But we need to phrase it and we need to frame it in such a fashion that we're relating to the younger voters. And we need to get their attention. I think, in all fairness, it's about what priorities we're faced in our day-to-day lives, and is an election on that list. And with the COVID, I think it is going to be on their list this cycle. So we want to make sure they understand what the Republicans stand for and what we're offering to make sure this great country and this great state has the answers for them, and making sure we are a great state to live in.
Yep. And I think not seeding certain issues too, because there's some like climate that we just seed, and that's polls show that's important to young voters, and they want to hear solutions from us. So if the Green New Deal is not it, we need to be able to talk about what that looks like as far as free market solutions. So that's really good points.
But we got to get it past the sound bites. Or if
Secretary Pate, you'll like this one. A millennial voter asked the question, I think the dog ate my request form. How do I get a different one? Well, that's not okay. I may have changed the wording a little.
If they go to the voterready.iowa.gov site, there'll be a place they can get a new form. They can call their county auditor and they do the same thing.
And I believe in Story County, you can actually go to the county auditor site and just download the form, and it's free and it's prepaid. Right. So all you do is fill it out and send it back.
Yeah, you can go to and you can download one from our site as well. Either way, we'll get you set up and get you moving.
Yep. Okay. In Story County, you can vote live now too. We can plug that. The early voting at the county administration building in Nevada is going on. I think most counties probably do that as well for those that are watching because of the YR feed. Somebody else had a similar question about, they said the Postal Service scans their mail, so they must see images of what's coming, but they never saw their request in the mailbox. So is that a problem you've heard about them not arriving, or does that seem fairly isolated?
I'm not familiar with that being a problem, but when you send out 2 million of these, I'm not going to say that some things may not have gotten through. That's why we were so aggressive in reaching out to media and online to let you know to look in your mailbox. And if you don't get one, as I said, go to our voterreadyiowa.gov site or your county auditor site and get that absentee request form and get yourself set up. But you can track it. Once you have the absentee ballot request form filled out and mailed in, you'll know if you go online, there'll be a tracking program there you can tie into. It'll show you when the courthouse receives it. It'll show you when the courthouse sends the ballot out to you, and it will show you when the courthouse got it back. So, clearly you can make sure it didn't get lost in the mail. And if you see some little hiccup in there, you would want to follow up to make sure your ballot is on track.
Very good.
Okay, I promised you I was going to ask this question, so
Sure.
I'm going to ask it. What does the Secretary of State do?
Well, as we were joking before we started this, I don't have formal responsibilities for treaties, but I do spend a little bit of fun time making sure that we have bragging rights with states of Minnesota and Illinois and anybody else around us.
Gotta keep Floyd, right?
Yeah, that part of it. So my Iowa State fans, we got to have good seasons. My Hawkeye fans, my Panther fans, all my good college and universities in Iowa, we need good seasons so that we can let them know that we're the #1 state. But setting that aside, the majority of it is commerce. I deal with about anything that touches businesses. So if you look at our site, there's probably more forms than you ever want to imagine or deal with. I spent a lot of time trying to get rid of some of those or streamlining them, but they are there. When I came back into office, I was pretty depressed because it looked like my office had missed the whole Bill Gates era with computer technology, which was extremely frustrating. So we've spent a significant amount of time getting the legislature to approve funding and to upgrade to the latest technology. And we're getting there. We have pretty much now got about 70%, I think, or more of our processes, our forms that are online, so you can file them that way. That works for you. That means we're open 24/7. It helps the local person who has to interact with the government. And we're going to get them all there eventually. And even with the COVID-19, it's been a real lifesaver by having it that way, because clearly government didn't have their doors open and their counters open to take on clients, but we were able to direct you to our online services. So, whether you're filing for a new corporation, or if you're a registered travel agent, or if you're dealing with finances and you have to have what they call UCC, a Uniform Commercial Code, it's a lien when you're buying things, which really impacts a lot of commercial and farming people out there. Those all go through our office, hundreds of thousands of those a year. And that's a big part of it. Notaries, the list goes on. That's a big piece. And of course, elections. As the commissioner of elections and voter registration, we oversee those, and we coordinate, kind of like the coach, if you will, for the 99 county auditors to make sure they've got the plays and they can be successful running their elections in their counties is a big part of what we do. And we keep that going. I serve on the state's executive council, which is like a cabinet for the governor. It's made up of the Secretary of Ag, the auditor, the state treasurer, and myself. I don't think I missed anybody there, and the governor. And we meet on Mondays, and in the absence of the governor, I chair the meeting, and we deal with a lot of the legal litigation stuff and some other state issues that are more statewide in compass. So that's another role. And I have the honor right now serving as the national president of the National Association of Secretaries of State. And that's been truly rewarding, an honor and a privilege, but it also gives me a chance to see what other states are doing and bring some of those best practices to Iowa.
And send our best practices out, because we're in the top 5% anyway, right?
Well, we Iowans are modest, but you're right.
Okay, so from the from the readiness for the primary election, you guys think you're at the upper 90% ready for
I'm,
what's going to happen?
I'm very confident that we've got our A team on board and we're proceeding. I will say to you, we hope for the best and we plan for the worst. I'm sorry, that's how you have to do it. But we are dealing with some new areas and the volume is just overwhelming. I mean, as I shared with these statistics, these are huge numbers of people who are choosing to vote absentee, which what we encouraged it. So we hoped we'd have this problem, to be candid. So we're trying to make sure we're preparing for that as well, because one of the other responsibilities we have, we're supposed to give you election night results. And if we have these kind of numbers, it takes a while to count those. Even with the help of a counting machine, it takes a while to process those. And so I've been on conference calls with the county auditors, interacting with them on how we best deal with that. And that's one of those, that's probably the biggest issue right now we're working on, is to make sure we're prepared to get those ballots counted accurately and timely. Because we don't want to be, sadly to say, we don't want to turn out like we did the caucus for the Democrats. What it took them, what was it? I lost track, 3 weeks to get their count done. Now, I advocate don't give the results until you know the accuracy and the total, but I don't want to be in that situation here where we're talking about, can't tell you in Iowa, give me a few more weeks. We really want to make sure that we've got that one covered. So that's probably one of our bigger issues right now. And we're still working to make sure the polling sites are comfortable, that the locations are comfortable, that they've got the social distancing for the lines, and that they have all those fine points taken care of. But again, I think these auditors are really taking it seriously, and we're counting on them. And I think we'll get her done. We're going to learn some things from this. That's part of what the primary is for us too. And what we learn from that will help us be even more successful come the general election. Hopefully we will not have the same COVID-19 intensity in front of us, but we still, again, need to take that experience so that when we have a huge turnout, which will be at a presidential election, tend to be 70% of the people voting. That's a lot out of 2 million. So we definitely want to make sure we're ready for that one.
What are the deadline? Oh, go ahead, John.
On the primary ballots, there's a lot of spaces for write-in candidates in those.
Mm-hmm.
How do those get kicked out so that they're also counted? Is there something on your electronic reader that kicks those out, or is that something that people have to flip through?
No, the counter will identify those, and they'll be set aside for manual review by a board, and that board is made up of Republican and Democrats who help review those. So we have a balanced approach to that process. If we had a significant write-in effort going, it might take a little longer to get that race totaled for a county. But at this time, I don't know anything on the congressional or bigger picture level. There may be something you might experience for a county seat or
county supervisors. We have that situation.
Yeah, and that may be, but again, if it's only the one, I think that the auditors are pretty good about they've done that before. They'll get it done.
And what are the deadlines for voting right now, if folks are interested in following up on this discussion and voting?
Sure. We want to get those absentee ballot requests all done. I'm trying to pull it off the top of my head. I think it's about May 25th, if I remember it correctly, is the last date to request an absentee ballot. So don't hesitate. Don't do it now. So make sure you take your wife's up to her right after you get done here, Brett.
Yep, I will.
So she can get hers processed. So let's not slow that down, and then and turn around and get it mailed in, because it has to be postmarked before the June 2nd election date, and that's very important. It's not, the mail has its challenges too, folks. So don't wait till rush out on June 1st at midnight and drop it in a mailbox. So let's try to get it out as soon as you can. The other thing I just underscore too, I didn't mention, is we do have curbside voting too. This is something that's been around, but most people aren't aware of it because it was really focused more on folks who might have some physical challenges. or was uncomfortable coming into a polling location, but wanted to have the opportunity to at least drive to a polling location. So in that case, all your voting sites in Iowa, when you drive up to them, there will be a sign located close to the front door area that will say it's your opportunity to it'll be called curbside voting. I'll get it right. And there'll be a phone number on there, and you'll dial that number up off your cell, and two people from the polling site will come out to your vehicle and assist you with your voting from your car. And that's just one other thing that we think is going to be used a lot, because there'll be still some who aren't comfortable with the COVID situation maybe, but the more that vote absentee, the less pressure we have on safe distancing and the timeliness of how we get people to the voting. We don't want lines, and that can still happen. And we've been very good in Iowa about avoiding those. And I'm a little older than most of folks out there. I won't date myself, but when I was voting in person, you didn't think anything that you were in line for 45 minutes to an hour. That was the old days, folks. I recognize that. We didn't really do a lot of absentee voting back then, but right now, a lot of the public would be very upset if they had to wait more than 10 minutes. And we don't want anyone really standing in line with the COVID situation. So that's why we really pushed the absentee like we did this cycle, because we thought that would help better manage. And I think it's been successful from that standpoint.
I don't know if I waited more than 5 minutes, but
And so you young Republicans, when an elderly person like myself comes up, you should let me cut through.
Let me know how that works.
so I do have a follow-up question to that. So let's say, I get this, I leave it on the counter, I forget to turn in my absentee ballot, or I change my mind, I decide I want to vote in person. How does that process work?
The cleanest way is bring it with you to the polling site if you're going to vote on election day, and hand it into them, and they'll get rid of it for you. Otherwise, what they're going to do is they're going to vote you provisional. They're going to let you vote, but the ballot you cast at the polling site is going to be put in a separate envelope and set aside until they can make sure that the one you had mailed to you didn't get mailed in. And again, as much as I like you, Brett, you only get one vote. Okay, that's it.
I don't know how we're ever going to win an election if we only get to vote once.
Well, I'm confident that we have a lot of smart Iowans who like what we Republicans are representing, and we just got to make sure they hear that message and show up with some enthusiasm to vote.
Well, that's one thing I enjoy as a transplant Iowan, is how, as a state, we avoid the gerrymandering that almost every other state has to deal with, that unfairly sways elections. And then we also have a clean election process. And I think a lot of Iowans probably take that for granted. We don't have to deal with some of the things that even our neighboring states deal with as far as election integrity goes.
Sure. Well, this election is pretty important on so many different levels. The people you're electing to your legislature are going to be dealing with reapportionment. You just mentioned that. With the census coming back out, we're going to be looking at these congressional districts and these legislative districts and mapping those to see how they'll be remade, if you will, in the very near future. And the state legislators are the ones who are going to vote up or down on those matters. And yes, Iowa has a good reputation of how we've handled those, both under Republicans and Democrats. And that's something we want to keep. But I want to make sure, we keep that in mind. That's one of the big things in the legislature coming up. You also have a Congress right now that, for the Republicans, I'm sure many of us would like to see a few of those seats go back to our column. And that's going to be if that's not a motivator, I don't know what is, for people to get out there and to make sure their voice is heard and their vote is counted.
You mentioned the census. Does this your department have any role in the federal census, or are you just recipients of the data?
No, we are recipients, as you pointed out. We do have a role in the code. I co-chair, I should say I'm the vice chair, with the lieutenant governor of our Iowa census efforts. And but the feds run it. They're the ones running the whole process. Our role is to public awareness, encouraging Iowans to step up and do the census, because so much of the federal funding is based on those numbers that they collect. And if you're in a community that has had high growth, you want to make sure you're getting recognition for that, because your costs are gone up and you're giving tax dollars, federal tax dollars are going to DC. You'd like to see some of that come back to your local government. So I can't underscore enough. We really want to make sure our voice is heard and we fill out those surveys. And Iowa in the past has been very, very good about filling out their census numbers and that. I did mine right away. I hope most of you have. It was real easy, didn't take long. Thank you. I'm glad to hear it, John. We need to keep that focused right now. In fact, I'm meeting, I believe next Monday is another one of our Iowa census task meetings. We're kind of going to be figuring out where we're at and what we need to do to bring this in.
And I've seen a lot of promotion from City of Ames and others about claiming Ames, trying to get the college students to make sure that they cast their respond to the census from Ames. And so, yeah, I mean, even communities like Nevada that have been growing, I mean, we want to see people make sure that they respond to that so that our population is reflected appropriately. So that's a really,
You know, there were only 3 people in my house, but there were 5 spaces for names.
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't do that.
Well, I think they thought maybe you had some children moving back in or
Yeah.
things like that who might want to be hanging out at your place.
So far, so good.
Jacob, you got some questions?
Yep. So I've got a question from a Story County resident. I know my earlier question was specifically about younger voters. This now going to the opposite end of the spectrum with older voters, specifically older voters in, say, retirement homes. Many of them in the past, they've always stuck to in-person voting. Is there anything being done to help facilitate absentee voting for voters in those types of communities?
Yes, the county auditors work on putting extra effort into those types of care centers. It's been a little more challenging with the COVID-19 right now, but yes, we do. We make sure they have every opportunity to vote absentee. And I think that we all recognize that it's been really hard on that age group because of the isolation they're going through. So yes, we do still do that. And we through our own public efforts in bringing attention to that and awareness for the seniors who maybe aren't in a care center, they're just at home by themselves. We wanted them to know it's okay to vote absentee, because a lot of them are traditionalists who always voted in person. And that's just the way they grew up, and that's the way they were told to do it. They want to make sure, they watched their ballot go into the box and that it was handled and counted the right way. I respect that, but we wanted to let them know they had an option this time around. You can vote from home. It's okay. And if you want to use the curbside, you can do that as well. And so if you and your friends want to remind them of that, please do. I think they need to know that we want their vote to count.
Is there a phone number that we can put on to our webpage here that would assist? Because, we're talking about the elderly population right now, some of whom are going to need assistance with filing for the absentee ballot,
Right.
or with any of those kind of things. Is there a number we can put on so that family members can make sure that they're following the right regulations and rules for stuff?
I would encourage you to put your local county auditor's main phone number on there. That's
Okay.
what I tell you, because they know if they've already had a group. We put usually a group together to go into some of these facilities, and they will know if they've done that already, and they possibly can also help line up arrangements for them to get whatever it is they need to be successful in voting. Jacob, do you have anything else? You've been awful quiet.
I got him with the
No,
dog.
that was my main question.
I got him with the dog ate my request for him. I think
There you go.
That shut
There's
him
no
down.
way I'm going to be able to top that one.
Yeah.
Well, let me underscore something for a lot of my friends out there who are tuned into all these special things we're doing during this particular pandemic election cycle. What we're doing we think are the efforts we had to do or need to do to make sure people could vote safe and make sure their vote got counted. I don't believe for a moment these are things that we will continue to do on a regular basis because they were done for an emergency reason. That's got to be underscored here. And I think you heard early on, I'm not a big fan of pushing strictly a vote by mail approach for campaigns like some states do. And it's a personal position, but also I can back it up by saying that those states who do that, they have no better voter participation than we do. Our state is one of the highest in the country with our approach of giving you the choice. If you want to vote by mail, you can with the absentee. If you want to vote in person, you can choose to come to the polling location, or you can vote early from your courthouse, or you can vote curbside. We really like to believe that we give you the choice and the option of what you're most comfortable with and how you want to approach it. And it's been pretty balanced right now as far as who uses what. As I said, about 40% use absentee, and that varies from county to county. The urban counties tend to be a little higher on that, but you look at 99 counties, majority of the counties are voting in person still.
And then there was a question too in the chat about if you had to guess on what the percentage breakdown of absentee versus in person for this election would be, how would you guess that would go?
Well, it's going to be huge for absentee. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I already shared with you, when you're at 370,000 people who requested an absentee, and that's 160,000 more than even voted in the last presidential primary cycle. So I think this is going to be the unusual situation. And I think it's because Iowans are stepping up and trying to do what we in government are asking them to do. It's vote safe. We want to make sure your voice is heard, that you get to vote. But we want you to be healthy and safe in that regards. And it makes our poll workers safer, because I don't wish to expose the poll workers to situations where they too might be exposed to COVID-19. We want to keep it, safe. And I'm telling you, poll workers and voters alike, if you've got a temperature or any of the symptoms for COVID-19, you ought not be coming to the polling location. That's why you need to vote absentee for right now, to assure that you'll be safe and get that accomplished. Those are just the basic facts.
Anybody else have questions?
I think the one other question or statement, and I'd like to have comments back from the other folks here. We have a unique opportunity now with the electronic age that we're in to get more information about the candidates out so that we can actually be better informed as an electorate. How do we get the word out that something like this conversation was had?
Sure. I think social media is a pretty big beast. There are a lot of different people in it and different ways to reach all of them. My office spends a significant amount of time trying to tap into that and using the demographics we know and how to put our message there. Campaigns are doing the same thing. Organizations like yours, whether it be your own lists that you've been building, we have to do the same thing. It's just a shift from the older days. You kept a mail list. We had a list of Republicans that we wanted to mail things to keep them informed and to invite them to come to events. Well, now we need to do more in the standpoint of how do we make sure we can get our message out, whether we're tweeting it out or whether we are blogging, whether we are doing streams like this. We have to use every creative bone in our body to identify that. And, some of these audiences, you may only have 10 or 20 people. Some you may have 100 or more. But I think that's what we have to do for the time being. We're building this system every day because we are going through a huge transition. I get enough of the emails right now from the Republican Party and Republican type groups trying to help candidates understand how to work in this digital world right now. How do you run a digital campaign? How do we get their attention? Some days I gotta tell you, I get a little frustrated because I got so many emails. I go, how many can I read when it's taken me an hour to go through? But I'm not gonna complain too loudly because where else am I gonna get the information? It just isn't lying around. So I don't have one silver bullet here, folks. It's really all the above. And you are part of one of all the above. You have your circle. I like to call it building the choir. And as we reach out to each one of these groups, you're helping us build the choir out so that our message is clearly, is heard out there clearly. So thank you for that.
Well, so you know, we already have 49 people reached, and the one that we did a couple nights ago, I saw 585 this morning. So we evidently have people looking at our page.
It's awesome. And that's what we have to do. And we need to ask those people, what do you want to see on our page? It doesn't mean we're going to change who we are, but if there's a way they want that information presented to them, you know, we need to adapt a little. You know, I'm not going to pick on anyone in person, but some of us have a shorter attention span than others. So you got to give me something, tease me, to get me on there, and then I'll spend some time looking at as I call it, the white paper. Give me all the detail.
Yeah, and John hit on something I wrote down because it's a whole nother topic we want to get into now. But in the electronic age, I think it would be helpful to have a whole one of these on just how do you vet sources and know that you're getting good information, because for every piece of good information out there, there's 5 pieces of bad information. And that's one thing that I've found is, you know, in our pharmacy school curriculum, we go through a lot of how you vet sources, how you interpret studies and those types of things. And I think that type of information could be good, but I won't go into too much detail there. But
wait, are you saying that you can't go with I like that conspiracy theory, so I'm going to propose it?
Yeah, basically.
Well,
but
Brad, I want to say something on that point. That when we started my cycle out as president of the National Association of Secretary of State last July, that was my #1 priority. We called it Trusted Info 2020. Mm-hmm. We were going to focus on letting Americans know you need to make sure you're getting accurate information, because that is the #1 problem we face in elections in these days in politics. Misinformation from legitimate and not so legitimate sources. And it isn't like we used to think, well, okay, Democrats, you vote on Tuesday, Republicans vote on Wednesday stuff. It's a lot trickier than that. The way they put things out there to put us in a bad light or whatever it might be. So we still have that program out there, the Trusted Info 2020, and we really encourage Iowans, if it's hard information about the technical side of elections, you go to the SOS website or you go to your auditor website. And I believe those sites are a lot more legitimate than you might have gotten from some other group who chose to call themselves a Better America for Voting or something like that. I don't want to pick on that group now. So if they're legitimate, hallelujah. But I mean, there are so many groups out there who just plain mislead us with the name of their group. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yep. Anybody can, with a computer now, can put whatever information they want out there. So it's important to be critical.
And you can even edit Wikipedia.
Yeah, you're right. Been there and seen that one.
Yeah, I've seen some fun ones too, but like after sporting events, they make different people mayors of the school they just beat and things like that. And it baffles me how some of those things can happen. But
I'm guilty of editing a Wikipedia page as a birthday gift for one of my best friends for his university. I put him down under notable alumni. It was up there for about 18 months. So that tells you.
Wow.
Brian, if you're watching this, you're welcome.
So yeah, other than that, we've been doing a lot of these both on the Story County side and on the Wire side. So on the Story County side, we have a primary for county supervisor, and both of those discussions are on our Facebook page, the Republican Party of Story County. You can watch those and learn more. The Wires did one last week with the 4th District congressional candidates, did one about the special election in House District 25, or not U.S. House District 25 out in California. That special election was yesterday, and the Wires have one tomorrow with the 1st District and the 3rd District, and then next week with the 2nd. So there's lots of stuff going on. I'd encourage you to watch both pages. Also, go to both websites. Both organizations have ways you can get plugged in with emails. We have, luckily, an incredible secretary that's the same of both organizations, and she does a phenomenal job. And if you've noticed, Deborah Stoner's been in the chat putting some really good follow-up information and links in here for folks to look at. So she helps us get good information out. You can sign up for those emails either on iowawire.com or on storycountygop.com. And you can also donate financially to either organization as well. So with that, I don't have anything else, but I want to thank Secretary Pate for joining us. I think we've had a really informative conversation, and I know I've learned some things, and hopefully those that
Great.
watch either live or later learn too, because I found more people end up watching this when we're done than those that watch it live. So people will continue to watch it.
I appreciate your invitation. I would tell all folks out there, go to voterreadyiowa.gov. There's a lot of information there. It can help them with their questions, and reach out to our local county auditor.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for joining. Good night.
Thank you, Secretary Pate.
Thank you.
Thank you.